The question is around cognitive functioning. Can I say something about losing cognitive functioning with MS and the dark night of soul that comes with that? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, that's been an experience here. When I was first diagnosed, the presentation of MS to me was given by a neurological optometrist who described it as an inflammatory brain disease. And at that time, I wasn't aware of any cognitive changes, but the idea of losing my mind led to such a deep rabbit hole of suffering, terror. It had never occurred to me that I could lose that. And that concept and that idea was like a death sentence. This is all looking backward. There's no story to be told of where I was then and where I am now. A lot of those details are, they're in the past now. They're not real anymore. It's just an interpretation of a memory, and the memory here really isn't. It's not trusted. I'm not going to say that my mind is a certain way because of MS or a certain way because of non-dual realization. In the non-dual process of losing the separate self, it is very common to experience changes in memory, living more in the present moment, short-term, long-term memory loss. I don't know where one begins and one ends. What wants to be shared here in this moment? What is alive around cognitive changes? There's just a deep empathy for the terror of losing one's mind, because we're taught that that's what we are. We're taught that we are what we think. We're taught that we are what we produce. So in order to produce in this world, we have to be intelligent and capable and high achieving and strategic and on and on and on and on and on. In the Western world, the mind is, you hear people talk about disassociation, like living from the neck up. The mind is worshipped in a way that the body isn't. The body is expected to be a certain way, and if it's not, then that's shameful. That's a lesson. There are many lessons we get, but this is a big emphasis in this culture. So there's so much compassion for any reaction that you may be having to memory loss, or losing words, or making up words, or feeling foggy. I would encourage noticing the difference between one's direct experience of cognitive change and the external reflections back. For me, when I would feel a flare up or a lot of symptoms, and it's different now. I will say it's different now. There's a peace with it. And so I don't want what I'm talking about to be misinterpreted, that I'm encouraging anyone to flip a switch and be at peace, because that's not how it happens. It happens. It continues to happen here. It's not like I'm at a arrival point, but the process happens in turning towards the most painful place. Because the idea of it is always growing in pain, because concepts and mental objects have infinite capacity to be painful. Whereas direct experience, moving into the body, moving into the direct noticing of mind, and that might be silence, if you're noticing silence in the mind, or it might be fearful thoughts or contractions physically, moving into direct experience, and by that I mean non-separating, which is non-duality, by the way. Non-dual awakening is just that, always, ongoingly, and when that continues, things fall away. Old patterns that used to be habitual of continuing to separate tend to soften and fall away, but it doesn't matter where you are, non-duality is there for you. In the moment that the aliveness is allowed to be felt exactly as it is, even if it's, oh, I'm realizing I can't remember anything, terror, tension, loneliness, shame, even if that is a non-dual experience, the direct experience of going into it in that moment is not ever going to be bigger than you can handle, and is always going to be more it's not even on the same plane as what the mind does. The mind will make it suffering and separating. Going into the experience is life. This is not my life. This is life happening through me, through this form. I didn't choose to forget these words. I didn't choose to lose my mind. There was no me to lose anything in the first place. And life in this form, in this moment, is having certain experiences and then allowing it to be felt. And the compassion here is that really processing those changes and those feelings with a disability, I would be surprised if it doesn't involve so much grief. Like, the grief is part of it, losing who I thought I was, losing who I expected myself to be, what I expected my life to be. We can't leapfrog that grief. And this is the theme of death that I talk about. It's the death of who we expect ourselves to be. That spiritual awakening, hey, MS can offer very similar wake-up calls. And I will say, just as I'm ending, and this isn't a carrot to bait you or some silver lining, but just the authentic experience here right now, because I'm not deep in that suffering in this moment. It doesn't mean the suffering of cognitive change doesn't still happen, but in this moment there is a peace and there's a okayness. This whole talk, like, this is not fishing for cognitive thought. This is aliveness expressing, and words are coming. And there's a difference between thought that's controlling and resisting the present moment. The mind-identified thought, and this is a whole nother topic, that is different. That kind of thought is different than life expressing the aliveness, or there will be expression. It might be wordless sometimes, often. Here in this moment, this whole talk has been an alive expression. There are no thoughts coming in to orient or to point to what needs to be said next. That can happen, but right now there is here. This is the non-dual expression that isn't, the conditioning isn't trying to hide right now. For some reason, it's not triggered, and so this is the non-dual expression that doesn't need thought. So in the death of the me who needs to control what I remember or what I forget, or how clear I am, or what I should say, or when that really is allowed to die, life reorients. Life is lived in a different way. And that doesn't mean that with disability we don't need support with that reorientation. Different levels of ability and physical and mental changes still, these are still real. But it just means that cognitive changes aren't what we think they are. And the invitation is to reorient away from other people's reactions to when you're forgetting a word, or when you're not presenting yourself in the same way. Because here, when people would react to my cognitive changes, their fear would become my terror and my self-loathing. So when that's allowed to just be, sometimes it's just silent. Sometimes it's just peaceful. Sometimes there's searching, waiting for concept to come when it's ready. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Clearly there's so much to be said here, and I'll even own the fact that maybe threads here that I brought up need more fleshing out, or were started and unfinished. And yeah, there's no doubt in the competency of the aliveness that's expressing in this moment here. There's no doubt. There's so much gratitude and appreciation, and that wants to be shared with anyone else, whether or not it's a physical disability or just aging or postpartum or sleep deprivation. Like, this is so human that we're not our minds, And when the mind changes, may that be an opportunity to feel deeper into what we really are and what we really aren't.